Chapter 11, Counterattack, Escape from Base. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 5 days later, the Institute for Genetic Modification in Mexico City, Xander Rice looked at the young version of Wolverine X-24 he had copied using Wolverine genes in front of him, and couldn't help laughing. I finally succeeded in my research. A Wolverine that completely obeys my orders. The world and the future will surrender under my feet. His father, Dale Rice, was one of the scientists who performed the adamantium transplant for Logan, but was killed when Logan escaped from the laboratory. From that moment on, he was determined to kill all uncontrolled and dangerous mutants and create mutant soldiers who would obey his orders. Later, he established Yakley Gene Company and used the food and beverage companies he controlled to disseminate the M43 virus they developed to the public on a large scale. This virus will not affect humans, but it will curb the abilities of existing mutants and eliminate genetic mutations in future generations of humans. After more than 20 years of hard work, there will finally be no new mutants born in this world. Donald, since those experimental subjects are unwilling to obey orders, let's deal with them all. Turning around, Dr. Rice gave instructions with cold eyes to a man whose right hand was completely replaced by a robotic arm. His original plan was to use the mutant genes collected early on to breed a new batch of mutant children through surrogate mothers in Mexico, and then sell them as weapons to other organizations. However, after this period of experiments, it was discovered that after these children grew up, they actually had their own thoughts, which they could not completely control. And even tried to escape. So now that he has developed mutant clones that are completely under his control, he naturally doesn't need those failed products, and he felt that maybe not just selling weapons, as long as he could stabilize a large number of clone mutants who obeyed his orders, then he could completely rule the entire world. Do you want to deal with that number 757 as well? Donald was not surprised by Dr. Rice's proposal. Dr. Rice hesitated for 2 seconds and then nodded. Dispose of it. Now that the replication technology is mature, in addition to replicating Wolverine in large quantities, you may also be able to replicate Professor X and Magneto. There is no need to waste resources on inferior experimental products. Learn. Donald pulled out the pistol from his waist, turned around and left the experimental base. On the other side, George, who was practicing hand gestures and casting spells in his room, looked at the clock hanging on the wall, and his face gradually became serious. No, is it about to start? Normally at this time, someone should have come to take him to training. It looks like it started. At this time, the door to his room was suddenly opened, and 2 familiar figures walked in. The leader was the instructor who had been training him during this period. I just said this guy is a waste. Training for so long is just a waste of my time. It's not time to deal with it now. After the instructor came in, he glanced at George with disgust, and then ordered to the men behind him holding submachine guns. Deal with it, and then throw the body into the laboratory's crematorium, where it will be burned together with the small batch of garbage. Yes, Captain. The subordinate raised the submachine gun in his hand, aimed at George and pulled the bolt, but just when he was about to pull the trigger, he heard experimental subject number 757 suddenly say something incomprehensible. Open the Alaho hole. With a pop sound, the ability suppressor on experimental subject number 757's neck automatically detached. Immediately afterwards, he felt a chill on his neck, and his consciousness gradually became blurred. It turned out that George started to cast spells as soon as he saw the 2 people appear. However, because the spell casting movements were very small, the 2 people on the opposite side did not take it seriously. The ability suppressor was released, and the magnetic control fully exploded. The dagger he had placed at the door in advance flew up instantly and directly wiped the guard's neck, temporarily eliminating the crisis. Stab it. The instructor pulled out the dagger from his waist and deflected the dagger from behind, and cold sweat suddenly broke out on his forehead. How so? If he hadn't reacted in time just now, he would have followed the same path as his subordinates. The moment he saw the ability suppressor of experimental subject number 757 falling off, he, who had been wandering on the edge of life and death all year round, immediately became alert and immediately pulled out the dagger from his waist. But if experimental subject number 757 attacks him first, then he probably won't have time to react. Have you hidden your abilities and strength? In his impression, experimental subject number 757's speed and strength in controlling the dagger were not strong, and he could usually deflect it easily, but just now, although he successfully deflected the dagger, his wrist still hurt slightly due to the strong force on the dagger. Dead people don't need to know that much. George controlled the dagger to swipe to destroy the surveillance in the room, and then attack like a violent storm towards the instructor who could usually defeat him easily. He does have hidden strength in normal times, but he won't be as strong as he is now. The main reason is that the shared wizard blood has an unexpected bonus to his mutant abilities, because the speed of the dagger was too fast, the angle was too tricky, and the power was very impressive. The instructor was already impressed after just a few rounds. He wanted to escape, wanted to fight George in close combat, but George didn't give him any chance at all, so he could only defend as much as possible, hoping that his companions would find the abnormality here and come to rescue him. However, George knew that the time for escape was precious, so how could he waste time here? Gun. He controlled the dagger attack while hooking his hand at the dead guard over there, and the submachine gun in the guard's hand immediately flew into his hand. Instructor. Goodbye. Aiming the submachine gun at the instructor who was still trying to resist the dagger, George pulled the trigger without hesitation. He was not a rigid person. He had a gun but didn't use it. He had to use it. Oh, God. The instructor widened his eyes in horror when he saw this, and was shot into a sieve before he could finish his words. George waved his hand to retrieve his dagger, and took back the instructor's dagger as well. He took the submachine gun, walked out of the room where he was imprisoned, and sneaked out of the laboratory. He controlled the dagger to destroy all the surveillance that might discover him along the way, as well as the guards he met. Soon he heard fierce gunshots and screams. It was obvious that this time it was not just him who had to be dealt with, but all the mutant children. Perhaps it was because of this that no guards came in time when there was a problem on his side. Compared to him, the mutant children caused more chaos. This is also the reason why he has not been in a hurry to escape, but has to wait until today to escape. If he escaped alone, in this experimental base full of surveillance, he would probably be surrounded by a large number of guards after walking a few steps, facing a large number of guns. He is not Magneto, and he can't stop it at all. Chapter 12, Choice, to save or not to save. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Call out. Controlling two daggers and wiping off the necks of two guards in a sneak attack, George came to a fork in the road. According to what he had learned and overheard secretly during this period, the right side of the forked road was the canteen, and beyond the canteen was the room where the mutant children were kept, and the left side was the road leading outside the laboratory. If he walked to the left at this time, with his current strength, he would most likely be able to sneak out safely and get a car to escape. Once you drive to a crowded urban area, the sky is high and the birds can fly. With those mutant children attracting firepower, there probably won't be many people chasing him later. Just as he was about to step towards the left side of the forked road, a miserable cry sounded from the depths of the right forked road. It was an immature voice, the voice of a child, and this scream also made George lower his raised foot again. It has nothing to do with me. I have no relatives or friends. There is no need to take risks for people I don't know. They can escape in the end anyway. After hesitating for a moment, he raised his foot again and prepared to step to the left. Another scream sounded. It was another child. There were a total of 50 mutant children in the entire experimental base, and according to what he saw in the movie, only less than 20 escaped in the end, including X-24 little wolf girl. In other words, more than 30 mutant children died in this escape. Although they are just children now, if they grow up in the future, they will be good fighting forces. If they can be recruited, they will have an extra layer of protection in this dangerous Marvel world. Besides, wealth can be gained through risk, and for the sake of the future, it is worth taking some risks now. If it's really too dangerous, it's not too late to run away then. As soon as his thoughts changed, George moved his foot that was originally going to be on the left side to the right side. In fact, at this moment, he didn't know in his heart whether his current choice was really because of the reason he just thought of, or simply because of the lives of the more than 20 children. People are like this sometimes. No one knows what choice they will make when the time comes. Some people think they are selfish, but at critical moments they choose to sacrifice themselves to save others, and some people talk about benevolence, justice, and morality, but in the end they choose to be the first to escape. George thinks he is not a good person, but he is not a bad person either. He is a normal person whose moral level is at the average level of human beings. If he were asked to sacrifice himself to save others, he wouldn't be able to do it, but if he could risk saving others, especially a group of children, without sacrificing himself, then he thought maybe he could give it a try. Lady, Will, Ellie. In the cafeteria, Gabriella looked at the 3 children who were shot dead for stopping the pursuers, and tears flowed from her eyes again. After understanding that the purpose of this genetic modification research institute was not to research specific drugs to cure cancer, but to cultivate mutant killers, she and several equally kind-hearted colleagues decided to secretly escape with these poor children. But before the plan could be implemented, the senior management of the laboratory had already decided to execute these children collectively. For this reason, they had to escape early, but even though the children had various magical abilities, they were no match for the experienced guards holding cold firearms. Just by escaping to the cafeteria, several of her colleagues had been killed for covering up the situation, and more than a dozen of the 50 children had been killed. If she wanted to actually escape later, it was estimated that more people would die. Lola, at this time, seeing X-23, the strongest among the children, after killing 6 people in a row, his limbs were also caught and fixed in mid-air, unable to break free. Gabriella pulled out the body of the guard next to her with a submachine gun and said to the children behind him, "You go to the door and Aunt Isa will take you to your destination." Isa is the last colleague alive. She is usually responsible for driving a large truck to transport daily supplies purchased from the city to the base. After receiving their notification, they had already driven their car to the door to pick them up. "What about you and Laura?" The slightly older mutant boy in the lead had a worried look on his face. Although they have been living in a laboratory and have no common sense, they are not stupid. "Rico, you are the oldest among them. I will leave them all to you. Take them to their destination and wait for me there. I will definitely take Laura to find you." Gabriella told the boy in a gentle tone, then held a submachine gun and fired wildly at the opposite side, intending to create an opportunity for the children to escape. Her shooting skills were not good, but this burst of random shooting also caused the guards who were controlling the little wolf girl to panic, causing one of the little wolf girl's feet to break free, and fiercely used the adamantium alloy wolf claw on that foot. Inserted into a guard's eye, temporarily freed from restraints. However, it was obvious that more guards had arrived on the other side of the passage. Rikudo gritted his teeth when he saw this, and ran towards the back corridor with his unrelated brothers and sisters. Not long after escaping from the canteen, he was stopped by 4 guards with firearms in the passage. Everyone come together, they were scared inside, but they still mustered up the courage and planned to fight to the death with the 4 guards and escape from here. Whoosh! Whoosh! However, before their abilities were activated, 2 of the guards suddenly fell to the ground with blood gushing out of their necks. The remaining 2 guards turned around in a hurry, but were greeted by 2 bullets. "Are you all right?" George dealt with 4 guards, and looked at the stunned children in front of him, and he was slightly relieved. There were still 34 children alive in front of him, and he came in time. Number 757, when Ricto found that the one who saved them was the mutant number 757 who never spoke, he was also stunned for a moment, but then he immediately said anxiously, "Aunt Gabriella and Laura are still in the cafeteria. I have cleared all the guards behind. You continue to escape, I will save them." George did not hesitate, and after giving instructions, he threw away the submachine gun in his hand, replaced it with the 2 guns of the guards on the ground, and rushed to the cafeteria. So cruel, as soon as he rushed into the cafeteria, he saw the little wolf girl riding on the neck of a guard, firing at his head, and his brains were dried out. That posture frightened the besieging guards. However, he was too thin after all, and was suppressed by the guards who reacted with bullets. Although he could not be killed because of his self-healing ability, he was still shot down from the air and retreated repeatedly. Gabriella, who was next to him, had used up all her bullets and was suppressed behind the bunker, so she could not help at all. "It's time to show your real skills." At this moment, it was obviously not enough to just control the dagger to kill the enemy. He did not have the self-healing ability to be fearless of so many guns on the other side. If he could not kill the opponent at the fastest speed, what awaited him was ruthless firepower coverage. So George set up 2 submachine guns, attached all the control of magnetic force to the bullets in the magazine, and began to output crazily. After the bullets were fired, they did not fly according to the original trajectory, but were affected by the magnetic force and turned into arcs, accurately hitting the eyebrows of all the guards. The shooting speed of the submachine gun and the accuracy of the sniper rifle were the trump cards that really dared to come to help. Chapter 13 George's Final. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Ever since he knew that his mutant limit was only level 2, he has been thinking about how to use his abilities to the maximum extent. He couldn't make countless bullets or even missiles stop and rebound like Magneto, nor could he lift thousands of tons of things, or use magnetism to fly and change the Earth's magnetic field. However, he felt that the way the instructor at the experimental base trained him to control a dagger to kill people was too low. It's better to use a needle than a dagger. At least the number and speed of control will be much faster. Although the power is smaller, it should not be bad to attack the vital points such as the 7 orifices. Of course, after thinking hard, he thought that if he wanted to maximize the power of magnetism, he still had to use firearms. The bullets fired by firearms, whether in speed or damage, are much stronger than any sharp weapon he controls. He only needs to slightly affect the trajectory of the bullet to become a sharpshooter beyond the limit of human beings. It's still a submachine gun now. If he becomes more powerful in the future and can control the trajectory of the bullets of heavy machine guns, that would be amazing. He can deal with all the guards of the entire base by himself. Let's go. After firing most of the 2 magazines, all the guards in the cafeteria had already fallen to the ground. George waved to the stunned Gabriella and the confused little wolf girl. Lola, let's go. Gabriella came to her senses and hurried forward to pull the little wolf girl towards George. She knew the experimental subject number 757, of course, but unlike other mutant children, this directly generated adult mutant did not need to be taken care of by nurses like them, but was taken care of by special personnel. But since the other party was willing to help, they were definitely not enemies. Running all the way with Gabriella and the little wolf girl, they soon caught up with the children in front. But George did not dare to be careless, because he knew that the guards of this experimental base were far more than that. It's just that the other party did not expect the current situation to happen, and they have not fully reacted for a while. And it is not ruled out that the other party has some more lethal and advanced weapons. Don't look at how ruthless he was just now. He killed a group of guards in the blink of an eye with 2 submachine guns. That was mainly because the little wolf girl attracted the firepower and launched a sneak attack. To be honest, in his current situation, it would be a big problem if he encountered a sniper. Some special Barrett heavy sniper rifles, with high penetration bullets, can penetrate thick concrete walls with one shot. If he is sniped from a long distance, his magnetic force cannot be deflected at all, and he may be killed before he can even react, so now is not the time to slack off. Fortunately, there were no accidents on the way back. He did not encounter the sniper he was worried about, nor the clone of Wolverine, and successfully arrived outside the experimental base. Do you know where the most important laboratory and data room of this base are? After carrying the children to the truck compartment, George did not get on the car immediately, but asked Gabriella. Although Gabriella was a little confused, she quickly pointed out 2 directions. There and there. Very good, let's give them some gifts before we leave. George opened the bag on his back and took out a dozen grenades collected from the bodies of the guards. In fact, there were not only grenades, but also some cash in his bag, so that he would not be penniless after leaving. I hope you like it. Using his ability to control the grenades, he accurately shot them at the 2 locations pointed by Gabriella, and then pulled the fuses at the same time in mid-air. A moment later, a violent explosion sounded, and the 2 locations of the experimental base instantly turned into a sea of fire. Let's go. Seeing that the goal was achieved, George got into the car with Gabriella, who opened her mouth wide. The purpose of his doing this was very simple. If he could kill the senior executives of the experimental base, it would be the best. If not, he could also create chaos, destroy those important research materials, and slow down the opponent's pursuit, and his goal was indeed achieved. An hour later, Dr. Rice, who was covered in dust, slapped Commander Donald in the face and yelled angrily. "Waste, I asked you to deal with those garbage, but it turned out like this. Most of the people escaped, and so many of my important data were destroyed. If X-24 hadn't been fine, would have thrown you into the crematorium right now. Boss, it was my mistake. I didn't expect those nurses to help them escape." Donald didn't care about the pain on his face at all, but just bowed his head respectfully. Dr. Rice took a deep breath, calmed down and ordered. "Things have already happened. I don't want to hear your explanation. I want you to catch those escaped mutant children as quickly as possible and deal with them. Don't let them be discovered by other organizations." As one of the world's famous companies, he has secret connections with many terrorist organizations. He understands that this world is not simple, especially with the existence of a behemoth called S.H.I.E.L.D. If S.H.I.E.L.D. finds out that there are still mutants, they will definitely find him based on the clues of the mutants, and then it will be troublesome. Before a large number of mutants are cloned, he doesn't want to go against S.H.I.E.L.D. "Report to me anytime if there is anything later. I will bring X-24 to help when necessary, and I can also test the actual combat effect of X-24. "Yes, boss." Donald nodded, left the half-exploded laboratory, and went to gather his men. "What were the results of the investigation?" "Commander, according to the results of our investigation, it seems that it was caused by experimental subject number 757. According to a captain quickly stated the results of the investigation. Donald frowned after hearing this. "It's him, a mere second-level mutant. How can he have such strength?" He had been directing the previous battles, so he naturally knew what was going on. Although the mutant children escaped control with the help of several nurses, he quickly mobilized people to help stabilize the situation. If nothing else happened, he should have been able to block all the escaping mutant children in the cafeteria. But for some reason, after a burst of gunfire, his men became silent. He was preparing to pursue with more men, but was frightened by the explosion and rushed back immediately. There was no way around it. There was an explosion location near the big boss's laboratory. He didn't dare not go back. It shouldn't be wrong. Captain Biss, who was responsible for solving experimental subject number 757, was killed. Although he destroyed all the surveillance along the way, our trace analysis expert still found the traces he left to the canteen. However, from the analysis of the corpses that were killed, except for a few who died from daggers, most of them were gunshot wounds. Basically, they were fatally shot. The squad leader explained. "A sharpshooter, but he doesn't seem to have the ability in this area." Donald frowned, showing a puzzled look. Mutants with the potential to be sharpshooters generally either have supervision or special motion capture abilities, reaction abilities, etc. As far as he knows, experimental subject number 757 has psychic abilities and magnet control. Maybe you should ask your boss about this kind of thing. He only knows how to command operations. Research on mutant abilities is the boss's business. But thinking that the boss's anger was still lingering, I gave up. Anyway, he felt that even if he was a sharpshooter, he would be nothing without special training. Chapter 14: A Turn of Events. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What are your plans? Where are you going? Sitting in the truck, George asked the nurse Gabriella and the fat female driver Issa. In the movie, Gabriella sent the mutant children to the border of North Dakota, but it was not just because she read the comics and thought that it was the last refuge for mutants. She is not a child. How could she believe in the comics? In addition, Ricto, the eldest of the mutant children, also used the radio to contact unknown forces, because of George's mutant identity and the help. Just now, Gabriella already had a foundation of trust in George, and did not hide it at this time. "We have to rush to the border of North Dakota before 5 o'clock next Friday, and then cross the border to Canada." "Why go to Canada? Why at that time?" George showed a trace of confusion on his face. Gabriella explained. "We have checked the relevant information. Before the mutants disappeared, Canada was the most friendly country to mutants, so we took the initiative to contact the Canadian government before we decided to help the children escape. They are also willing to accept these children, but they don't want to cause trouble, so we must rush to the border before 5 o'clock next Friday." At that time, They will try to interfere with the satellites in that area and then meet us on the other side of the border. It turned out to be the Canadian government. George suddenly realized that he had watched the X-Men series, so he knew the general situation, but he didn't know some specific details. He didn't know whether the Canadian government was close to mutants or not so repulsive to mutants. However, he frowned again, because he personally didn't trust the Canadian government very much. The government is not an individual. There are many things to consider, and changing a leader may change a position. Even if the Canadian government did not reject mutants in the past, what about now? Will these mutant children become new experimental subjects after they go there? He would definitely not choose such an unsecured thing, so, he also told Gabriella his opinion. Gabriella was obviously surprised that George, a mutant who had never left the experimental base, could have such long-term considerations. However, her answer was also helpless. There is no way. Even if we know that there may be danger, we have no choice, because we really can't think of a better way. Working in this cruel experimental base, how could they not understand the ugliness of human nature, and how could they not worry that the children would enter another hell after they went there? But they had no choice, because they were all a group of people at the lowest level of society with no power, but the kindness in their hearts had not yet been extinguished. The children would definitely die if they stayed in this experimental base, and there might be some hope if they went to Canada. Yes, sometimes life is so helpless. George also sighed when he heard this. In his previous life, he was also at the bottom of society. He had experienced many helpless choices, but they were not so cruel. But after thinking about it carefully, he didn't have any good way, and he was unfamiliar with this world, but he would not leave his fate in the hands of the Canadian government. After sending these children to the border, he would leave and hide. Risking to save these children was already a humane act. To protect these children, it was impossible to follow them to Canada and be curbed by the Canadian government. Escorting them to the border was already his limit. At this moment, he had obviously forgotten the selfish reason that convinced him at the fork in the road. We are in Juarez. We will go directly to the border after purchasing some necessary daily necessities, then enter New Mexico, and go all the way north to North Dakota. If everything goes well, it will only take 2 days. After 2 hours of high-speed driving, the truck entered the city of Byers in northeastern Mexico, and George also stuck his head out to look out. He had heard of this city in his previous life, but it was not a good reputation. Byers, on the northeastern border of Mexico, on the south bank of the Grande River, across the river from El Paso, USA, is known as one of the most violent cities in the world. At its craziest, nearly 15,000 people were killed in crimes in 6 years. This city gathers the largest number of flower vendors in Mexico and is the most important source of flour in the United States. Big news: the CEO of Stark Group, the famous playboy Tony Stark, was kidnapped in Kunar Province, Afghanistan today, and his whereabouts are still unknown. The truck stopped in front of a large supermarket. When Gabriella and Isa went to buy daily necessities, George, who stayed behind, was suddenly attracted by the news broadcast on the TV in front of the supermarket. The incident when Iron Man was born, that his body shook, and something suddenly came to his mind, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. Maybe, there will be a new turn of events. Recalling all the Marvel movies he had watched in his previous life, he thought about it carefully and had a new idea in his mind. For him, it is better to believe in the character of Tony Stark than to believe in the character of the government. Although this guy is a little more philandering and proud, his character is still fine. Moreover, as one of the largest capitalists in the United States, even the government can't do anything to him. If he doesn't want to hand over the Iron Man suit, he won't hand it over. Just like Professor X, the reason why he could open a mutant school in New York was not only because the X-Men were strong, but more importantly, Professor X was a wealthy man himself, and his family was also a well-known capitalist. If they could get the protection of Tony Stark, then these mutant children would not only be able to get rid of a lot of troubles, but also perhaps enjoy the education and life of normal people, and he could also have a safe place to study magic. As for whether he would be involved in some subsequent events and face greater danger if he was related to Tony Stark, there was actually no way to deal with this kind of thing. We could only say that we should solve the current troubles first, win a relatively safe period of time to improve our strength as much as possible, and only when we are strong can we do it. Moreover, he also had his own ideas about whether to participate in the major events in the future. If this was the movie universe, he would definitely stay away. Even if Thanos snapped his fingers, he would be rescued in the end anyway, so there was no need to participate. Wouldn't it be better to study magic well? But this is not the movie universe, but an unknown Marvel universe mixed with mutants, so it's hard to say, because it is very likely that a major event will destroy the entire Earth, and since he lives on this planet, he naturally cannot escape. Rather than leaving his fate to those superheroes, it is better to leave it to himself. Maybe if he helps at a critical moment, he can get through those major events, so that the Earth and himself can be safe. So contact, that is sooner or later. Now, the most important thing is how to rescue Tony Stark and make him owe me a favor. George touched his chin and fell into deep thought. If he wants Tony Stark, the top rich man, to owe him a favor and help them sincerely, it can only be a life-saving grace, but with him alone and his current strength, how can he rescue Tony Stark? He doesn't even know the specific location of the other party, he only knows that it seems to be in a cave in the desert. Chapter 15 Searching for Wolverine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Can I borrow your cell phone? The truck started again, and George immediately asked Gabriella. Before thinking about how to save Tony Stark, he must understand the history and relevant situations of this world in order to make more accurate judgments and more complete plans, and the fastest way in this era is naturally to use the mobile phone to find out online. Of course, here you go. Gabriella took out her cell phone from her pocket without thinking and handed it to George. After getting the phone, George began to search the internet for the information he wanted to know. He did not return the phone to Gabriella until the truck entered the Mexican border and the sky gradually darkened. So that's it. In fact, the history of this universe is not much different from the movie universe, except that there are more mutant elements. According to online news reports, mutants were truly known to the public in 1973. The mutant Mystique assassinated Trask, but was eventually stopped. Mystique became a hero of mutants, and humans began to gradually accept the existence of mutants. In 1977, Quicksilver broke 8 world records in sports competitions, and the sports world began to ban mutants from participating in professional sports competitions. This conflicted with the movie universe, because according to the movie universe, Quicksilver was not born in that year. Quicksilver and Wanda in the movie universe were born in 1990. This also reminded him that many things in the future could not be dealt with completely according to the plot of the movies he watched. After that, the superhero organization X-Men was sought after by the public, and a large number of extended comics about X-Men appeared. The one in the hands of Little Wolf Girl and the others was one of them. Many stories in it are adapted from real events of the X-Men, but there are also a lot of fictions, such as the so-called Garden of Eden. In 1983, the Apocalypse incident occurred, and soon after it ended, the Westchester incident broke out. Professor X suddenly had epilepsy, and his brain went out of control and killed all the X-Men and mutant students in the school except Wolverine, plus more than 600 innocent humans around him. Since then, Professor X has been listed as a weapon of mass destruction by the US government and was wanted, and mutants began to disappear. More than 20 years later, most humans have forgotten the existence of mutants, and even many new generations only regard them as fake characters in comics. For some reason, governments around the Earth have been downplaying the history of mutants, as if they want to prove that the government is the biggest reliance of mankind, not mutant superheroes. Before 1973, there was almost no news about the existence of mutants. This is why Rogers became Captain America through the super soldier serum and defeated Hydra. It is probably because Wolverine and Sabretooth were ordinary soldiers with little reputation at that time. Professor X and Magneto were still children, and the Hellfire Club was also hidden in the dark. Have you ever thought about looking for Wolverine and Professor X who may still exist? At this time, George already had a rough plan in his mind. Although the history of this universe has many conflicts with what he knows, some things have not changed in general. He cannot rely entirely on known intelligence, but he cannot completely give up his advantages in this regard. At least the original reason for Tony Stark's kidnapping was probably Obadiah Stane, who wanted to kill Tony Stark and monopolize the Stark Group. However, his psychic ability was not enough to read the information about the 10 rings from Obadiah Stane, so as to find the location where Tony Stark was imprisoned, and Professor X was needed to take action. Professor X's brain was out of control from time to time because of epilepsy, but it has improved a lot under the effect of drugs, and he is still conscious in most cases. Maybe he can't be as powerful as before, but simple mind reading memory should still be possible. After all, he can still chat with the little wolf girl from a distance from time to time, with Wolverine as a meat shield. It is not difficult to rescue Tony Stark with his ability. Although Wolverine is old, he is not a terrorist who can stop him when he is serious. Moreover, when Gabriella escaped, she brought a lot of drugs that can temporarily enhance the abilities of mutants, allowing Wolverine to recover some strength, and most importantly, these two people have rich experience in planning and executing missions, which is something that he, Gabriella and this group of mutant children do not have. To be honest, in this foreign country, he himself is also completely in the dark, even worse than Gabriella. We have thought about it. We have been looking for information about them before, but we only heard that there is a person who looks like Wolverine working as a driver in El Paso, and there are no other clues, and we thought about it. Professor X is also a wanted criminal and may not be able to help us. Gabriella replied helplessly. George nodded after hearing this. In some ways, Gabriella's idea is not wrong. Wolverine and his friends are indeed in trouble. I have a plan now. If it succeeds, then in the future, the children may not need to be controlled by anyone and can live like normal people. Without any concealment, he told Gabriella all his plans. His idea is very simple. If Gabriella agrees, then he is willing to spend more time to help, which is an investment in the future. If Gabriella doesn't agree, then he won't force it. He is not a bad person. After sending the children to their destination, he will leave alone to complete the plan and stabilize in New York. Besides, his choice may not necessarily be the best for the children. They may live a better life in Canada. Upon hearing George's plan, Gabriella fell into deep thought. At this time, she was very conflicted, because to be honest, she had little confidence in the Canadian government. As a Mexican who grew up in Juarez, it was difficult for her to have much confidence in the government, but the plan George mentioned was also very risky. If George and the others failed to rescue Tony Stark in the end, and they missed the time agreed upon with the Canadian government, the children would eventually be captured and brutally killed by the people at the experimental base. Also, will Wolverine and Professor X be willing to help? Seeing the confusion in Gabriella's heart, George added. If Wolverine and Professor, today is Saturday, and there are 6 days until next Friday. If all goes well, 6 days will be enough for them to rescue Tony Stark. Well, George, thank you so much. Gabriella nodded gratefully. In fact, George could leave by himself without helping them. With George's ability and displayed mentality, it would not be difficult to escape from the lab's pursuit, but he chose to stay to help them and find a way for them to live better. No need. After all, I'm a guinea pig at the experimental base just like them. I can also be considered their older brother. George sighed with a smile. In fact, according to the time of creation, you should be considered the youngest among them. Gabriella seemed to think of something and suddenly laughed, and George couldn't help but smile when he heard this. That's right, it's been less than a year since his body was created, and he is really the youngest mutant in the laboratory. Chapter 16 Dusk Wolf's Concerns. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Early morning in El Paso County, Texas. Logan, who had just delivered his last customer, was sleeping tiredly in his rented extended-length luxury car, but was awakened by the noisy sound outside. What the hell? Cursing angrily, he had to get up with difficulty and push open the car door. He often encountered this kind of thing. It must be those gangsters who smuggled over from Mexico. They took a fancy to his luxury car and wanted to remove the wheels and sell it for money. However, he couldn't let those gangsters succeed at this time, because he still relied on this rented car to make money, and now he needed money very much. The professor's illness requires money to buy medicine. He has been saving money to buy a yacht and take the professor to live a safe life on the sea. After living for so many years and experiencing the death of his friends and loved ones, he was actually tired of his own life. The only thought now is to give Charles, his only old friend who redeemed him and is still alive, a decent old age life, and if these gangsters were to take off the wheel, not only would he have to pay the rental company, but he would also be unable to maintain this stable job. Hey, these nuts are all chrome-plated and have been damaged by you guys. You guys, leave quickly. Holding the car door, Logan tried to persuade these gangsters to leave without using violence, but the result was obviously not what he wanted. When the gangsters saw the car owner appearing, they did not run away immediately. Instead, they raised their hands and shot Logan, and then continued to remove the wheels. Killing seems to them to be as simple as eating and drinking. Logan's self-healing ability has been greatly reduced due to the toxins in the adamantium alloy, but such injuries are not enough to kill him. He stood up and slowly released his wolf claws, stepped forward and started fighting with the gangsters, but due to his aging body and lack of adequate rest, he was soon beaten to the ground by 6 gangsters. He could only protect his head with his hands and look for opportunities to fight back. George, can he really still help us now? In the big truck, Gabriella asked worriedly. They changed the route and drove to El Paso County. After 4 hours of searching, they finally found traces of Wolverine Logan, but the current scene made her lose some confidence. George smiled and nodded. Of course you can, and it can help a lot. Don't look at Wolverine like this now. If he really gets ruthless, no one will be able to match him. If a way to remove the adamantium alloy toxin can be found in the future, Wolverine's body will return to its peak youthful state. You must know that Tianchi also gained the ability to heal himself, but he has lived for thousands of years without any aging. You guys wait for me here, I'll go talk to him first. Pushing open the car door, George jumped out and used his power to control 2 daggers and swiped them at the necks of those gangsters. For this kind of gangster who has no moral bottom line and kills innocent people at will, he will naturally not have any kind thoughts and will aim at the vital points. Swish, brush, brush. There were several sounds of the trachea being cut by sharp blades. The gangsters who were kicking Wolverine instantly covered their necks and fell down in disbelief. Wolverine noticed the abnormality and let go of his arms, also looking surprised. At this moment, a hand reached out to him. It's okay, Wolverine Logan. Friend, you may have mistaken the person. I am not Wolverine, but thank you for your help. Logan did not stretch out his hand, but slowly stood up by himself. George didn't pay attention, retracted his hand and continued. My name is George, and I am a mutant. We have 35 mutant children here. We need your help and the professor's help. Mutants? Mutants have disappeared long ago. There are no mutants in this world, and there are no Wolverine or Professor. Wolverine shook his head and squatted down with some difficulty, trying to pick up the nuts scattered on the ground and restore the car's tires. George stretched out his hand and the scattered nuts on the ground instantly floated up and fell into his hand. There are indeed not many mutants that appear naturally, but there are still many mutants created by man-made experiments. For example, I am a mutant synthesized using the genes of the Professor and Magneto. Who are you? That when Wolverine saw the nut floating in the air, his eyes showed a vigilant look, and the wolf claws of his hand stretched out again, although one of them was stuck halfway. George paused when he saw this, and then waved in the direction of the truck parked on the side of the road not far away. After a while, Gabriella slowly walked over with the wolf girl and other 35 mutant children. Show Mr. Logan what you're capable of. The little wolf girl stretched out her adamantium alloy wolf claws, and Rico raised an earth wall from the ground. The other children also used their own abilities, controlling wind, fire, plants, water, and electricity. There are also breathing cold air and so on. Although the power is not great because it has not been developed yet, it can indeed prove one's mutant identity. Mr. Logan, George didn't lie to you, we just escaped from the Institute of Genetic Modification in Mexico City. Gabriella explained her experience and the situation of the institute in detail. After hearing this, Wolverine took a deep breath, looked at George and the children, and refused with some difficulty. I'm afraid, I can't and don't have the ability to help you. He didn't care about his own life or death, but the professor's current situation did not allow him to be involved in such a troublesome matter. If he didn't handle it well, he might cause the professor's death, so even if he couldn't bear it, he still refused at this time. Gabriella's eyes dimmed when she heard it, but George had expected it and did not give up. He knew the reason why Wolverine refused, and he also knew that Wolverine was essentially a kind person. As long as he gave a reasonable step, it would be easy to convince the other party. I accidentally saw the relevant information about the Westchester incident at the experimental base. You drove so hard to make money, probably to cure the professor's illness. You help us. In fact, you are also helping the professor and yourself. If we follow our plan, the professor will get the world's best medicine and equipment treatment in the future, and maybe he can return to normal. But have you ever thought that the famous playboy Tony Stark may not repay us, but may even sell us out? Not everyone in this world is willing to repay you after being saved. Many may even retaliate against you for their own benefit. Wolverine was silent for a moment and replied, he has a deep understanding of this kind of thing. He once saved an officer on the battlefield of World War II. As a result, when the officer was about to die of old age, he actually coveted his self-healing ability and wanted to kill him and take away his self-healing ability so that he could survive. Chapter 17, Border Factory. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Hearing Wolverine say this, George not only did not worry, but smiled. Since Wolverine has already considered this direction, it means that he guessed right. Wolverine is just hard-mouthed but soft-hearted, and he still wants to help in his heart. What kind of person is Tony Stark? We need to see him and then judge. If he is not trustworthy, then you can also get a sufficiently generous reward through this matter and leave. With money, you can take the professor to live the life you want, and don't have to care about us anymore. So, what do you think? I need to think about it. Wolverine took a bottle of strong liquor from the car seat, gulped it down in one breath, then closed his eyes and thought for a long time, and then slowly replied. Okay, I promise to help you, but there is a condition. You can't take the professor with you. The professor's situation is not as good as you think. He can't actively control and use his abilities, and once his figure appears in New York, it will cause panic in the government, which will be more troublesome at that time. No problem. George thought about it and nodded. He only thought about using Professor X's ability, but forgot the impact of Professor X's weapon of mass destruction entering New York, and maybe even S.H.I.E.L.D. would be attracted. Rather than that, it's better not to bring it. Anyway, at most, Obadiah will be tortured severely. I believe that under the threat of death, the other party will honestly tell the whereabouts of Tony Stark. In fact, this is also good. After all, Professor X is still inconvenient to move. Only he and Wolverine can move, and the efficiency is much higher. Then let's leave here quickly. The gangsters just fired a gun. I guess the police will come soon. Seeing that George had already negotiated, Gabriella couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, and then looked at the bodies of the gangsters on the ground and hurriedly reminded. And Wolverine bent down again, ready to press the wheel again. Don't worry, it's because of the gunshots that the police won't come so quickly. Okay, then they are really responsible. At this time, George also squatted down, and his hands kept changing gestures. Repair as before. The repair spell took effect, and the wheel that was originally removed was automatically restored immediately. This is the second spell he can cast with gestures. It seems that you have more than just the Professor and Magneto's genes in your body. Wolverine saw this and showed a surprised look on his face. George smiled and shrugged. In fact, I'm not sure how many genes they have integrated into my body. Your situation reminds me of a friend who used to be very talkative. He also had a lot of mutant genes integrated into his body and his mouth was sealed. Wolverine thought of the memory deep in his mind and couldn't help sighing. It's a pity that they are all gone now. Friends, the old ones go and the new ones come. Life must go on. Don't be so pessimistic. George comforted casually. In fact, he has always had a question in his mind, that is, whether the current Wolverine has experienced the reversal of the future, whether he has the memory of two different timelines, or whether there are no two timelines in this universe. In the X-Men's reversal of future past, changing the past will also change the present. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, changing the past only extends a new timeline and will not change the present. However, it is not easy for him to ask about this kind of thing now, so he can only wait until he is familiar with it in the future. Wolverine looked at him in surprise. It seems that you really have some of the Professor's genes in you. After the car was repaired, Wolverine drove a luxury extended car in front to lead the way, and Isha drove a truck with George and the children followed closely behind, driving all the way to the border. The professor's situation is special, so Wolverine hid him in a border area with almost no people. This used to be a factory opened by a multinational smelting company headquartered in Shanghai. In the end, it had to be abandoned and left because of the chaotic public security. Normally, no one would come here. The car stopped in front of an abandoned factory building on the border, and Wolverine introduced it to George. It is precisely because El Paso is close to Mexico, and a large number of Mexicans have smuggled here to live, and the public security is chaotic, that they can hide and not be discovered. If they were in a city with good public security, it would be impossible to hide. Logan, who are they? At this time, a man wrapped in a scarf and a hat, with only 2 eyes exposed, walked out of the factory carefully, and looked at George and the group of mutant children with some doubts. Caliban, these children are all mutants, go in first, and I will tell you in detail. Wolverine waved his hand and led everyone into the factory. George glanced at the man wrapped in a scarf, and the relevant information flashed in his mind instantly. Caliban, a mutant with the ability to track the location of mutants, was once a black market businessman who made huge profits by selling the traces of mutants. He also helped the Yak-Lai Gene Company to hunt down mutants for money. Later, he got albinism and could no longer see the sun. He began to repent for the crimes he committed and began to help Wolverine and Professor X hide their traces. At the end, he saw Professor X being killed, and in grief he detonated 2 grenades and died together with the enemy, so for now, he is considered a trustworthy mutant. No wonder. No wonder he always said that he was communicating with some people and that there were many new mutants. It turns out that there are indeed some. But Logan, are you really determined to do this? It's very dangerous. In the factory, after listening to Logan's words, Caliban frowned tightly. He sympathized with those mutant children, but he was more worried about Wolverine's safety. There were only 3 of them in the old generation of mutants, and after all these years of getting along, he had already regarded Wolverine and the Professor as his only relatives. George is right. Maybe this is the only way to really cure the Professor. You also know that the water tank can't trap the Professor. This is not a solution. We need money, better equipment and drugs to treat him. Besides, I don't believe that the Canadian government will treat those children well. There are no good people in the human government. Wolverine threw a bag of medicine and a card to Caliban. These medicines are enough for the Professor to use for a month. This card contains all the money I have saved over the years. I originally planned to buy a yacht to take you and the Professor to live on the sea. If something unexpected happens and I don't come back, I'll trouble you to take care of the Professor. Okay, I know I can't stop you. I can only tell you that if you don't come back, then I won't take care of that difficult old guy alone. I will leave him and leave with this money alone. Caliban took the medicine and the card, was silent for a moment, and finally replied with a smile. Wolverine also smiled for the first time after hearing this. You won't, otherwise you wouldn't have given up so much money you saved and chose to help us. It's your turn to feed the medicine. I've been tossing all night. Caliban shook his head helplessly, took out a bottle of medicine from the bag and put it in Wolverine's hand. Obviously, he was hit by Wolverine. Chapter 18, Encirclement and Counterattack. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Is this the famous Professor X? He looks much younger than in the movie. George looked at Professor X, who was pushed out of the water tank by Wolverine, and thought to himself, think about it, if it is 2029 in the movie, Professor X is already 97 years old, but in reality it is 2009, and If Professor at this moment, he decided that when he went to Hogwarts to learn magic in the future, he would also spend more time on healing magic. If modern technology cannot cure Professor X is the most powerful psychic in the world. He can read the thoughts and memories of others without physical contact, directly deprive and control other people's thoughts and actions through his psychic abilities. If coupled with a brainwave enhancement machine, it can even kill all ordinary humans and mutants on the Earth. New species, new mutants. Okay, Logan, you must help them, they need you. Professor. He grabbed one of Wolverine's hands tightly. Wait, and you will have a new family. Don't give up on yourself. Everything will get better. Then promise me, you won't give up. They also need your guidance, just like you once guided us. Wolverine's eyes slowly became determined, as if he had become the fearless fighter he once was. At this time, George came over. Without further ado, those people at the experimental base won't let us go like this, and we can't stay here for too long. Now we are divided into two groups. Logan and I go to New York to find a way to save Tony Stark, Professor, Caliban, Gabriella and ISA. You took your children to the North Dakota border to wait for news from us. Please note that a copy of Logan was created at the experimental base. Caliban, you must always pay attention to whether there are new mutants approaching. If you find any, you must move as soon as possible. Logan's clone. Caliban's pupils shrank, and then he pointed in the direction of the guide. If I sense correctly, the guy you mentioned is here. Looking along Caliban's finger, a long motorcade faintly emerged on the empty land in the distance. George narrowed his eyes. It's faster than I thought. It's good to take advantage of this opportunity to solve it, otherwise there will be trouble later. He had already expected the pursuit of the experimental base. With the financial resources and status of Yakley Gene Company, it was not difficult to obtain corresponding monitoring through local agencies. With a truck as big as theirs, it was impossible to hide their tracks. If it were before, it would be quite troublesome to be caught up, because even if he could use magnetism to change the trajectory of bullets and transform into a super sharpshooter, it would be of no use to X-24. When the bullets run out, he will die, but now it's different. It's not that Wolverine can defeat X-24, it's that he knows that Wolverine has an adamant alloy bullet, which was originally reserved for suicide, and can just deal with X-24. After killing X-24, there won't be much danger at the experimental base for the time being. If you want to create another Wolverine clone, it won't be that fast. In this way, when they go to save Tony Stark, they don't have to worry about the children being threatened by the experimental base. If there was a chance to kill Xander Rice, that would be even better. I have a plan. Turning to look at Wolverine, he quickly stated his response strategy. On the other side, Commander Donald, sitting in an armed jeep, was also making strategic arrangements through the intercom. In a moment, I will surround the factory and not let anyone go. If there is any abnormal movement, kill him directly, especially experimental subject number 757. Following his boss's orders, he mobilized all the connections he could, and soon found traces of the large truck. He also discovered that the escaping mutants had come into contact with Wolverine, who was hiding in El Paso. In fact, they already knew about the traces of Wolverine and the Professor. The reason why they were not hunted down like other mutants was because the boss said that it would be more uncomfortable for them to let them linger like now than to kill them. It's just that now that the escaped mutant children are mixed with Wolverine and the others, it's a bit difficult to handle, so after getting the boss's consent, they brought X-24 this time just in case. Originally, the boss wanted to come over in person to see the actual combat effectiveness of the X-24, but he was slightly injured in the previous laboratory explosion and was worried about number 757's marksmanship, so he stayed at the base. There were a total of more than 20 vehicles in the convoy, which surrounded the dilapidated factory building. Each vehicle was filled with strong men wearing body armor and loaded with live ammunition. After getting off the vehicle, they occupied various shooting points with their guns raised. Close to 100 people, a certain distance away from the factory building, there was a sniper lurking on the roof of an armed vehicle about the same size as a bus. Inside the vehicle was the final killer X-24. I didn't expect to meet you in this way, Wolverine, my former idol. Hand over those children, and I won't disturb your and that old man's peaceful life. Donald took off his sunglasses, put his hands behind his back and looked at Wolverine standing alone at the door of the factory, his tone full of ridicule. Looking at that look, it is obvious that he didn't take the once famous Wolverine seriously at all. Sorry, I don't know what you are talking about. This is private territory. Please go out. Wolverine thought about George's strategy of delaying time before, and resisted the urge to stab this bastard to death with his claws, and patiently persuaded. Donald pointed to the big truck at the door. You disappoint me so much. You may not be able to afford the price of deceiving me. I don't know who the truck belongs to. There is indeed no one you are looking for here. Wolverine still denied it. Donald gestured to his men behind him, and more than 20 people immediately rushed into the factory with guns. About 5 minutes later, they walked out of the factory and shook their heads at Donald. Donald raised his eyebrows, looked around, and finally locked his eyes on the abandoned water tank next to the factory with a smile. What a good idea, I guess they must be there, including the old guy. It's just an ordinary reservoir, there's really no one you're looking for here. Wolverine's face changed, and he slowly put one hand into his pocket. Donald ignored Wolverine and directly signaled his men to search the reservoir. At this moment, Wolverine quickly took out a tube of reagent from his pocket and quickly stabbed it into his arm. Chapter 19. It's decided to be you, little wolf girl. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Not good. Donald immediately stepped back after reacting. Of course, he recognized the reagent, because it was developed by their experimental base and was specifically used to improve the abilities of mutants in a short period of time. Once Wolverine is injected, his strength can be restored to its peak before the drug expires. Wolverine at his peak is definitely the most terrifying killer. Sniper, target Wolverine. However, the response from the intercom was, X-23 and Experiment 757 are found, they are attacking me. Release X-24 to deal with them. You continue to snipe Wolverine. After letting his men take over, Donald ordered the sniper. He didn't know how X-23 and Experiment 757 escaped silently under their tight siege, but it didn't matter. As long as X-24 was released, he could definitely deal with the two. According to the experimental data, X-23 is definitely not an opponent of X-24, and no matter how accurate the shooting of the experimental subject 757 is, it can't hurt X-24, and it belongs to the type that is completely restrained. The most important thing now is Wolverine, who has recovered his peak after taking medicine. In just a few words, the opponent has killed 10 of his elite men in a heavy siege and rain of bullets. If the sniper rifle is not used to restrict his actions, he and all the remaining people may be harvested by Wolverine. No wonder the boss has such a special liking for Wolverine. Received. The sniper over there fired a gunshot, and Wolverine was directly hit and knocked down by the sniper rifle. Others immediately rushed up and suppressed Wolverine with bullets to prevent him from getting up. On the other side, George and the little wolf girl were running towards the bus. They did not escape from the heavy siege, but left the factory in advance before the other side surrounded them and hid behind nearby obstacles. When the opponent's attention was all attracted by Wolverine, he quietly rushed towards the car that was obviously holding X-24. As long as X-24 could be dealt with in advance, the battle would be more than half won. However, what he didn't expect was that the opponent actually valued them so much and brought a sniper, which didn't appear in the movie. Fortunately, he brought the little wolf girl with good combat effectiveness just in case. If the sniper aimed the gun at him, well, he would just raise the little wolf girl as a shield. After all, with the little wolf girl's self-healing ability, even if she was hit by a sniper rifle, she would not be killed. Although it was a bit cruel to do so, if it really came to that, there was nothing he could do. It was a life-and-death fight. If they failed, it would not be just him who died, but everyone, including the more than 30 mutant children. It's just that the little wolf girl's body is too small to block his whole body, so he can only choose to raise it to block the upper body, which has more vital parts, and the two legs running wildly in the lower body are not so easy to be hit. However, he has wizard blood and amazing vitality. Even if he is accidentally shot, as long as it is not a vital part, it is not so easy to die. When he gets closer, he can affect the sniper. At present, he can't change the trajectory of the sniper bullet, but he can still affect the sniper body and make the gun body shake and unable to aim. In fact, the situation is better than he expected. The sniper did not turn the gun head to them in the end, but continued to aim at the factory. Obviously, Wolverine helped them attract enough attention, but he didn't ignore them, but released the fierce-looking X-24. Come on. Seeing that the back door of the bus had been opened, Wolverine's copy X-24 jumped out and roared towards them. George couldn't help but look happy. The opponent's operation was exactly what he wanted. At the same time, 4 elite soldiers got off the bus with X-24, but they did not come with X-24. Instead, they set up a camera, as if they were going to record the scene of X-24's battle. In fact, these soldiers knew how terrible X-24 was, and they did not believe that X-23 and Experiment 757 could win. Recording the battle video of X-24 was the request of the Elder, because this was also a practical test of X-24. And the video must be recorded for analysis afterwards. Seeing that he was getting closer and closer to X-24, George picked up the little wolf girl, then raised his hand and took out the submachine gun and shot X-24 twice. He did not use the adamantium bullet immediately, because if he killed X-24 now, the sniper would react immediately, and others would also focus on attacking him. It would be dangerous at that time, unless it was absolutely necessary. He was still unwilling to use the little wolf girl as a shield. So he had to take advantage of the other party's relaxed vigilance and get as close as possible. Once the distance reached his ability, he would have room to play as a sharpshooter. Bang! Bang! That the two bullets shot straight at X-24's eyes. The bullets could not kill X-24, but it would take time for the injured eyes to recover. Seeing George shooting at him, X-24 immediately raised his arm to block in front of him. Unfortunately, George's bullet was not straight. It suddenly turned into an arc before meeting X-24's arm, and finally hit X-24's eyes accurately. X-24's eyeball was blown up, and he immediately screamed and stopped. The eyeball can be restored, but the pain will not be reduced at all. It's decided to be you, little wolf girl. That while X-24's eyes have not recovered yet, George threw the little wolf girl out with all his strength. Go kill that sniper. The little wolf girl flew over X-24's head, landed with a tactical roll and stood up, and rushed towards the sniper and 4 soldiers on the bus without hesitation. At this time, X-24's eyeball had recovered, and immediately grabbed George with one claw, so fast that George didn't have time to react. Swish! Although George had retreated in time, the submachine gun in his hand was still split in half by X-24's claw. The second claw was George's neck. It's really cruel. Seeing this, George also took a breath of cold air, and then the magnetic force burst out with all his strength, concentrating on X-24's arm. Although he is not Magneto, who can easily control Wolverine, whose body is made of adamantium alloy, the force of several tens of kilograms on X-24's arm can definitely cause a significant impact. Sure enough, due to the effect of magnetism, X-24's arm suddenly paused, allowing George to dodge again. George did not want to fight, and took the opportunity to bypass X-24 and rush towards the bus, because he felt that he was being played by George. X-24 was furious and turned to chase George. George did not fight him head-on at all. He knew that he could not beat him, but just kept using magnetism to affect X-24's limbs, cleverly avoiding X-24's attacks again and again, and then kept approaching the bus. There was no way. He had acquired the ability for too short a time. Even if it was enhanced by the wizard bloodline, it was still not fully developed now. Originally, his body was developed to the limit of 100 kilograms of magnetic control, but at the beginning he could only use 10 kilograms. Later, he had the wizard bloodline and could use dozens of kilograms now. If he is given a few more years to adapt, the limit of his strength development is estimated to be several hundred kilograms. With several hundred kilograms, he can easily lift X-24 into the air and ravage him as he wants. Or if he learns magic for a while longer, he can easily knock him down with a stun spell. In general, there is a lot to look forward to in the future, but it is not possible now, so this is the only way to operate. Chapter 20. Thanks to my friend for sending me the sniper rifle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While George was dodging the X-24 attack in a somewhat awkward manner and approaching the bus, the little wolf girl had already rushed to the bus. The 4 soldiers who were filming found that the little wolf girl was approaching, and immediately took out their submachine guns and fired at the little wolf girl. The little wolf girl was also very experienced in combat. She was thin and flipped and jumped like a real wolf, dodging most of the bullets shot at her vital parts as much as possible, and endured the pain caused by the remaining bullets, and fiercely pounced on the 4 people. She had been trained in various killing techniques since she was a child, and she had long been accustomed to this kind of battle. The sniper on the bus felt bad when he heard the movement below, and immediately gave up continuing to assist in sniping Wolverine in the factory, and turned the gun head to the little wolf girl below. The little wolf girl had just fought and killed 2 soldiers, and was immediately shot in the chest. This shot was different from the previous ones. It was so powerful that it actually hit her directly and flew out. causing her to scream in pain. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the remaining two soldiers quickly stepped forward and pressed down the little wolf girl's arms and legs, making it impossible for her to get up. After all, the little wolf girl is still a child. Although she has good physical fitness and killing skills, she is still not as good as an adult in terms of pure strength, especially these two muscular strong men. No matter how she struggled, she couldn't get up. I want to see if you can recover after I blow up your head. The sniper turned his head to see the experimental subject number 757 fleeing in a panic under the attack of X-24. It is estimated that it will not last long, so a trace of cruelty appeared on his face, and he aimed the gun at the head of the little wolf girl who was pressed on the ground below. He didn't believe that the little wolf girl would be fine after being hit in the head by a sniper rifle. If one shot didn't kill her, 2 shots, 3 shots, if it really didn't kill her, it would be a pleasant thing to hear the other party screaming under his gun. Almost. At this moment, George also found that the little wolf girl over there was restrained. He calculated the distance and knew that it was time to shoot. He used his full power to act on X-24's ankle, causing her to stagger and miss her attack. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he did not continue to run away, but took out the pistol that had been hidden in his chest. He opened the safety and pointed the pistol at X-24's temple. Game over. Bang! With a gunshot, the first adamantium bullet that was loaded went down the barrel and shot into X-24's head, killing her with 1 shot. Hearing the gunshot here, the sniper who was originally preparing to shoot the little wolf girl's head subconsciously looked up at the experimental subject number 757. When he found that X-24 fell down and did not move, his face suddenly changed. He quickly turned the gun head again and aimed at the experimental subject number 757 who was running towards this side. How could this happen? However, at this time, he found that his sniper rifle was shaking involuntarily, and even wanted to fly out of his hand. Although he tried his best to suppress it, it was useless, and it even got worse. How can you aim accurately when the gun is shaking like this? He barely fired a few shots in a row, but all of them missed. Bang! Bang! The remote-controlled sniper rifle shook and ran in an S shape to avoid several sniper shots. Seeing the effective range of the pistol, George raised his hand and shot 2 shots at the 2 strong men who were suppressing the little wolf girl. The 2 strong men were shot in the head and fell to the ground one after another, and the little wolf girl also broke free from her restraints, inserted her claws into the bus, quickly climbed to the roof of the bus, and pounced on the sniper. She was very vengeful. If the other party hit her with a gun, she would hurt him. Commander, X-24 was killed. Be careful of X-23 and the experimental subject. Seeing X-23 flying towards him, the sniper knew that he was going to die, and hurriedly reported to Commander Donald on the intercom, but he was only halfway through the report when his chest was pierced. George came to the bottom of the bus and saw the bloody little wolf girl dragging the sniper's body off the roof. He couldn't help but twitch his lips. Okay, it's okay, leave it to me next. He touched the little wolf girl's head, picked her up, and took the submachine guns and sniper rifles of the 4 soldiers. He came to the driver's seat of the bus. If it weren't for the special situation this time, he didn't want the little wolf girl, who was still a child, to join such a cruel battle. Putting the little wolf girl on the co-pilot's seat, he touched the sniper rifle and couldn't help but sigh. Thank you for the sniper rifle. His current ability is not enough to change the trajectory of the sniper bullet, but it doesn't mean he can't in the future. Think about a sniper rifle with a range of more than 2,000 meters and can turn. What a powerful killer it is. He started the bus and rushed towards the factory. After reaching his ability, he directly smashed the glass in front of the bus, and controlled 4 submachine guns in front of him to fire at full power. Countless bullets shot out in arcs. In the factory, Donald looked at Wolverine, who was half kneeling on the ground and panting, and taunted. The effect of the drug has worn off. I wonder how long you can hold on. To tell you the truth, your backup, the experimental subjects number 757 and X-23, will probably be captured by my men soon, and then I will send you all off together. Just as he finished speaking, he heard the sniper's report and screams from the intercom. Wolverine laughed at this and stood up again with his strong willpower. It seems that we are going to send you off. Commander, it's bad. The bus is rushing towards the factory. Our people can't stop it. At this time, a team leader rushed in from outside the factory. You are good. It won't end like this. Retreat. Looking at Wolverine standing there, who didn't know how much fighting power he had left, and the fierce gunfire and screams coming from outside, Donald gritted his teeth and fled with the remaining less than 20 men in the car. Seeing that Donald finally escaped, Wolverine couldn't hold on any longer and sat on the ground. A moment later, a bus broke through the factory door and rushed in, stopping in front of Wolverine. The door opened, and George and the little wolf girl jumped down from it. Are you okay, Logan? Not dead yet. These sons of bitches, if it was 20 years ago, none of them would be able to escape. Wolverine stood up with difficulty. Don't swear in front of the children, but Logan, your performance just now is no worse than 20 years ago. At this time, Professor X pushed the wheelchair out of the water tank with everyone. Seeing this, George said. Although we have temporarily repelled them, we should not stay here for long. According to the previous plan, everyone should pack up and set off in 2 groups. George, we have decided not to go to Canada. The professor is right. If we rush before Friday, the time is too tight and it will be too dangerous for you. We can't be so selfish. At this time, Gabriella suddenly stood up and spoke to George.